So I just want to take another minute to mention immune tonics in general, especially immune tonics that are used in preparation of cold and flu season because they are so useful. In Chinese medicine, there's a certain type of energy. It is called Wei Qi. That's W-E-I, Qi as in energy. It's also called defensive energy. There's a very complicated physiology in traditional Chinese medicine where there's all kinds of different essences and substances and energies, etc., that are produced and have different functions. But in the case of this defensive energy, the Wei Qi, it is a certain type of energy that, although it does live within every organ system and it's inside your body, it is mostly distributed at the level of the epithelial being that tissue that skin is made from, that mucous membranes are made from. So the epithelial is going to be your nose, your mouth, your ears, your sinuses, your throat, even your lungs, which have a relationship with the external environment. Anything that is in contact with the external environment is epithelial tissue, including your stomach, your intestines, just all your orifices that have contact with the external environment. So because they have contact with the external environment, that's why there's so much of this defensive energy that accumulates in those areas, because your defenses are much more alive and ready to act at those places. Of course, if we were able to just have a certain kind of vision of where we could see bacteria, you're going to notice that so much of your microbiome and your own bacterial kind of covering and coating, your bacteria are just everywhere, are also living on all those epithelial surfaces, which also have a tremendous impact on your immune system. So in Chinese medicine, as a precursor to cold and flu season, or if we happen to know that somebody's immunity is low, we want to give formulations in order to stimulate this defensive energy so that they are just less likely to get colds and flus. One of my favorite formulas for this is called Jade Windscreen. It's because we're in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's almost impossible to get right now, unfortunately, but someday we'll be beyond this, and I think it's a good thing for people to just have that on hand if they know they're going to be flying in an airplane, or cold and flu season is on its way, or they're working in an air-conditioned situation, and they're feeling like they're prone to colds and flus. Now, one of the main herbs in this formula is astragalus. So you can take just astragalus. It's a Chinese medicinal, and that is fine. There are reasons that I won't go into of why I think it's better to actually take the actual formula, Jade Windscreen, but still astragalus is great. And by the way, I have given straight astragalus to people before who have had very low white blood cell count, like abnormally low, and watched it really come up from no other intervention other than simply giving the astragalus for a while. The one thing to realize, though, about astragalus is that it is an actual immune tonic, which is also true of herbs like echinacea and I think to some extent elderberry. There's other plants as well that would be in this category, but those are the three strongest that are coming to mind for me right now. So I'm mentioning this only because it is during the COVID-19 pandemic right now, and so if someone were to go into respiratory distress where there's so much inflammation in their lungs and they're in pneumonia, and then their whole immune system starts attacking that whole situation, you don't want to be stimulating the immune system at that time. You could actually create more havoc. Another time where you have to be a little careful with this particular herb is in autoimmune diseases. I mean, I have a little autoimmune thing that is actually in remission just because of certain steps I took and actions I took. But if you've really got a full-blown autoimmune disease, again, your immune system is feeling rather hypervigilant, and so you don't want to be stimulating it too much. There are times when you can, but you want to make sure you're balancing that out with other strategies and especially other herbs. So a lot of people know of the medicinal mushroom family as good immune tonics, and there's a lot that could be said about that. Actually, that could be an entire presentation in and of itself. But mushrooms usually are a very safe, especially reishi and shiitake, very safe way to strengthen the immune system, and they tend to be much more immune modulating. They don't tend to be quite as stimulating to the immune system, and they're used a lot in cancer prevention. Another thing I want to say is that sometimes in Chinese medicine, we might see conditions of low immunity when there is both what we call general qi as well as yang deficiency. So yang versus yin. Yin is more sort of the fluid aspect of the body. Yang is more of the metabolic, fiery aspect of the body. So we often see low immunity when both the energy and the general energy as well as the yang qi is low, which is interesting because if we cross that over in Western science, we know that people who have a tendency to be hypothyroid, who are going to tend to have both low qi as well as yang, where their thyroid isn't generating as much metabolic heat, and so they're going to have a lot of their general tissues are going to just be colder. We know that they're much more prone to upper respiratory infections. So in Chinese medicine, we may need to, rather than simply tonifying the Wei Qi, there's going to be cases where we want to actually tonify the yang and that metabolic power of the body. There are also cases of low immunity that in Chinese medicine come from a very deep problem, what we would call the marrow, the essence. And so usually we're going to be good with simply tonifying the Wei Qi, the defensive energy, and sometimes, if indicated, the yang. But sometimes we actually need to give much deeper essence tonics. And if you cross this over into Western thinking, we know that the cells, all the blood cells and the white blood cells and the red blood cells and plasma cells, they're all coming really as stem cells out of the marrow. And there are situations where someone may be weakened for some reason. There's a variety of possible reasons as to why that would be, and simply not creating enough white blood cells. We have tonics for this as well. I mean, they're very slow acting and need to be taken over a long period of time. Those particular formulations are better taken through an entire winter. If we were going to break this down seasonally, I mean, we don't have the seasons quite so much here in Hawaii, but if we were to break it down seasonally, winter would be a time for deeply building the marrow and the very deep energies of the body, and also actually warming the body and dispelling cold. And then once we get to spring, there's more of a moving the qi, and in Western naturopathic medicine we would say certainly cleansing as well, cleansing and alkalinizing. This could actually be a good time to be doing the mushrooms, by the way, if you're in really good health and what we're really focusing on is simply enhancing immunity. And then summer will come. In the summer we want to clear heat, cool the body, and in the fall, the very beginning of the fall would be a good time to take some herbal tonics that have very balancing effects to the lungs, that tonify both the qi of the lungs and what we call the yin of the lungs, which is really kind of like the juiciness of the tissue in a way, so that the lungs aren't all like hard and rigid, but that the tissue just has a lot more interface and exchange with the environment. And we would want, and some of these herb formulas that are very balancing to the lungs will also clear any residual stuck phlegm, clear any stuck heat, inflammation, etc. And after doing perhaps a few weeks of lung balancing formula, then we could go straight into the jade windscreen or the astragalus, something to really prepare for cold and flu season. Of course, we then have formulations if the illness does go deeper and enter into your lungs. We're often, not always, but often out of the antiviral realm and then just simply dealing with herbs that help to ventilate the lungs and help to resolve phlegm, help open the breath, etc. And that's a different conversation as well. But it's very detailed, it's very beautiful. Traditional Chinese medicine is pretty awesome. And by the way, herbs were used a lot in the COVID-19 pandemic in China. I have a list of 7 formulations that were commonly given because once it really got going as a pandemic, most people were there was no time to individually diagnose, and for the most part, people got there was one of 2 formulas that they would be given, but according to research there was a great alleviation of symptoms, and it helped people from progressing into severe breathing problems and pneumonia. All right, over and out. Aloha.